Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to talk about why and how I became a CRL Certified Registered Locksmith, who and what helped me become a Certified Registered Locksmith, and whether or not it may or may not be valuable to you. So why I became a Certified Registered Locksmith, or just CRL, is because I have noticed that education is a very beneficial thing. If you make a living in the door hardware industry, the locksmithing industry, associated fields, I would think that the logic applies. Education is absolutely something that cannot be overstated in terms of having an impact. Education and learning things seems to just simply creep into your daily existence at your job. I believe that any and all education that you can engage in will absolutely translate to you being able to more effectively do your job, be more positive about your job, and obviously have a net positive effect for your client base. Why I became a certified registered locksmith is I started out feeling that I have years of experience within the industry, and I thought, well, it'd be awfully nice to have the credentials after my name, so I guess it was vanity originally. I am a nearly 30-year a veteran working in the door hardware industry. We are traditional distributors of commercial building hardware, hinges, door closers, lock sets, exit devices, on and on and on. Steel doors, wood doors, steel frames, the associated door types as well. That experience is also part of my total experience, which involves a lot of dealing with lock sets, dealing with the fundamentals of the principles of how lock sets work, being able to satisfy clients' needs when it comes to lock sets, and the services, locksmithing, that you can apply to that material, and do so in such a way where you benefit your organization and your client base. So the experience is selling the hardware itself, but also providing the knowledge and services required to support that hardware, and in this case, the lock sets that you're supplying. Supporting the lock sets is going to obviously mean an understanding of how locks work, being able to mechanically service them, being able to arrange keying requirements that match the total needs of the end user, whether it comes down to key control or keyways or key types, or how to arrange the physical biddings within the cylinders themselves to give the client what they actually need to be successful in their goals. So my experience was the launching pad of why I felt that I would be able to become a certified registered locksmith. And just for the sake of putting a timestamp where we are, it's March 16th, 2019. I took the exam on March 14th and passed. And we'll get to the test itself. But I thought that I would be able to pass the test, or at least approach the concept of taking the test, because I felt like I already had possessed on-the-job knowledge backed by real-world experiences, environments, customers walking in saying, help me. I don't know how to help you. Let me figure it out. And then you figure it out. Whether that means you're teaching yourself how to key small format interchangeable core, or you are trying to figure out why exactly it is you have this unintentional cross-keying, where the client comes in and they've got 3 locks and they were at a previous locksmith, but apartment 1 opens apartment 3. How did that happen? Well, where's your master key? Bring me all the keys. So forcing yourself to realize, oh, this is why the system is contaminated. Or it be just simply understanding by the process of experience and making mistakes what a maximum adjacent cut specification. I remember keying a lock in 1991, and it was a Schlage typical 5 or 6 pin classic keyway, and I cut a 9 next to a 1, and I put that, started to bend a bit, combinate the cylinder, and I put the 9 in and then put the 1 in, and my 1 pin disappeared, and I says, well, that 1's no good, throw that away. Get another 1, did the same thing. So the point of the matter is, you learn on the job experience all these little pieces that actually apply to the realm of locksmithing, because you are actually playing within that sandbox, so to speak. However, what the typical door hardware person is exposed to is but a microcosm of what the locksmith gets involved in. One definitely leads to the other, but one will, having experience in the door hardware industry and supporting lock sets is a significantly short step towards becoming a certified registered locksmith. And here's what I mean. How I became a certified registered locksmith was starting with the confidence that I could do it, because I felt incredibly confident based on what knowledge I already possessed, on-the-job training, being self-taught. More importantly, being able to call people and say, help me with this. I was on a job site one time, and I was rekeying a client's home. A very good client, family friend, the whole 9 yards. I couldn't say no. I didn't want to say no. Went to the house and okay, let me rekey these locks. I have rekeyed every lock that I have ever encountered. That wasn't something that I was unable to because of a lack of tools or access to the material. Even, high security keyways by Medico, by Sargent, by Schlage, being able to service those. Well, I got to the job site and my self-taught on-the-job training failed me because I had no idea how to get the knobs off. I have a customer of mine who's an actual locksmith, who makes a living as a locksmith in the classic sense with the mobile van and the proper workbench. It was a Sargent 8-line lock, old style with the threaded roses. I called up my client and said, Carl, I have no idea what I'm doing here. How do I get these? He's like, oh, you've got an old Sargent 8-line. He knew right away. Being able to call somebody. Teaching myself how to pin small format. Literally calling the Falcon factory, which was Newman Tonks at that time, asking for the key department, saying, listen, I'm teaching myself how to do this. I have read all the literature. May I ask you a couple of questions to help me get through this barrier that I seem to have hit? Absolutely, ask away. So being able to call people is crucial. What you'll find in the world of, whether it be door and hardware related, DHI, the Door Hardware Institute, or locksmithing, Aloa, are incredibly eager, helpful people. So being able to call people is the next step of being able to say, yes, I think I can do it. I've got some experience. I can master that work. I know that I can rely on people who are more experienced than I am to help me learn, to teach me how to do it. And then the next step, in terms of the how I became, was I took Aloa's AFL class. And Aloa, ALOA.org, is the Locksmith National Governing Organization. I took their AFL, the Aloa Fundamental Locksmith class. The AFL is not necessarily a path towards other certifications, meaning you get that and then you work towards others. Aloa states that it's not a path to certification, which I don't understand, because you do have a designation if you pass, and the material that you cover in the class definitely dovetails to the deeper, greater topics. But I think that the AFL designation is intended to most likely stand alone. You are someone who works within a related industry, or you are an apprentice level or a beginner level. Here would be a great class to take to expose you to a very full, rounded approach to locksmithing in general. So I took that AFL class July of 2018. I took that class with 3 instructors. The lead instructor, his name is Chris Chase. The other 2 instructors, Josh Lloyd, who at that time worked, and I believe still does, works with Chris Chase. Chris Chase, certified registered locksmith. I don't know if Josh Lloyd is a certified registered locksmith because I don't have his business card. And then John LaRue, who is a locksmith working out of Daytona Beach. Chris and Josh work out of Austin, Texas, or did at that time. John LaRue works out of Daytona Beach, Florida, at least at that time. So I decided to take the AFL class because my son, 5 generations of Howards to do this work, he's the 5th generation, took the class, passed it. Well, I figured, well, I can't, my 20-year-old son can't have a designation that I don't have, so I decided to take it. Education is always a good thing. I was expecting a lot of this to be review, and parts of it were, but a lot of it was not, because the door hardware industry doesn't prepare you to understand really the principles of locks and how they operate, distilled into their essence. What is a lock? And I can tell you that Chris Chase, Josh Lloyd, John LaRue were absolutely outrageously enthusiastic, helpful, practically excited to help you learn. I believe that Chris Chase is the author or primary author of the fundamentals of locksmithing that you will get in the that I got in the AFL class, and it is because of that class and the mastery of the subject matter of Chris Chase, Josh Lloyd, super eager, John LaRue. They're all working locksmiths. They all have different experiences. They all seem to me like to be very different locksmiths, so that they have probably different areas of expertise or strengths in different areas. But the combining of those 3 individuals together really, absolutely caused me to become infected with the love of learning the subject matter. It is an absolutely infectious subject to learn about, because I walked in realizing I know how locks work. Not really, buddy. You know how to work on locks today. Locksmithing has been going on for hundreds, thousands of years. So through the AFL class, I was exposed to all of these other topics, and it allowed me to better organize my mind in terms of what I already knew. Why do I know what I already know? I don't know why I know that. I know it works, but I don't know why. The AFL class allowed me to put into the proper structure why it is or how it is a lock works. And, the fundamental concept of the lock is, something, and I don't recall the exact quote, but it's basically a lock works because a key does not work because of a blockage. A key does work because it can work around the blockage or remove the blockage. It's that simple. Whether it be an Egyptian lock from 4,000 years ago, or it be the pin tumbler cylinder that we use every day, invented by Linus Yale Jr., or it be all of the incredible high security advances created throughout the history of the development of the lock and the key. What I realized through the AFL classes, I knew a small sliver of what there was to know. I could not have named the different types of tumblers, the different types of locks and how they're constructed, and the names of all the parts associated in them. I could not speak about safe locks. I could not speak very expertly about keyway identification. I could not speak about the terms of the very things that I used practically on a daily basis. The AFL class allowed me to get right with what I already knew, expose myself to what I didn't know, and as a result of that, I developed an affinity for the subject matter to the point where I decided there's no turning back. I'm going to continue on learning more about this. Now, the downside of my experience is that I don't ever work on lever tumbler locks. Never. I have not seen a warded lock brought into the front counter since 1992. The concept of the development of high security locks was practically foreign to me because my exposure to them is extremely limited. We're not in the part of the food chain, so to speak, to be involved in high security cylinders, which are very often, served from the factory direct to the end user, because that direct end user could be a national laboratory or a branch of the military, or it could be some sort of scenario where they own their own keyway. So it was the realization of what I didn't know is what I think was the threat to my comfort level, saying, okay, man up, proceed or decide not to. Being an advocate of education, because education, as my uncle told me, education is always a good thing. It always does seem to seep into your daily workflow. It started with the AFL class. Loved it, did very well. I could not encourage you more to become a member of Aloa and take that class. I encourage you to take Aloa classes, even though it's not necessarily going to reflect on your daily work. But I promise you that that knowledge is going to seep into your daily work. Absolutely it is. I took a forensic locksmithing class with Aloa last year, and I will not operate as a field forensics expert when it comes to determining a method of bypass to use on a cylinder. I won't likely ever be called into court to be an expert witness on how that was done. But I can promise you, understanding methods of bypass and the evidence that it leads does help me every single day when I'm working on cylinders and lock sets in general. After the AFL class, I decided to learn more about these locks that I had no knowledge on, primarily lever tumbler locks. Lever tumbler locks are locks that are used 18th century, 19th century. Outside of the United States, it turns out they're actually quite common. In the United States, they're really only seen in safety deposit boxes because those locks are lever tumbler construction locks. And they're seen in old buildings, and even those are generally just warded locks, but incredibly old lock sets that really predate the mass penetration of the pin tumbler cylinder into the hardware industry. So learning more about lever locks, because I realized I knew nothing about them, zero, is where it started. So I started to read about that information. Then I continued to be more interested in the subject matter. As a result of trying to learn more about lever locks, I obtained a copy of the Aloa PRP resource guide, the proficiency, the guide to taking proficiency tests from Aloa. The bottom line is, to me it was confusing how to become certified through Aloa, because I started to look into that as well. Contacting Aloa is like, well, okay, be a member. That makes sense. It will be less expensive to take these tests. But you might say to yourself, well, where's the book? And Aloa says, what book? We don't teach the test, Aloa says. And to me that was, what do you mean you don't teach the test? How do I learn how to take the test? And then it, over time, became quite obvious. Aloa doesn't teach you how to be a locksmith. You teach yourself, your life, your experience, your on-the-job training. How far you decide to dive into that world is the teacher. And because I was never exposed to lever tumbler locks, I had no knowledge in that at all. Aloa's not going to teach me lever tumbler locks, even though they do. I mean, they have classes, and the AFL talked at length about it. But you have to go get the knowledge. If you want to learn how to put on door closers, a good place to start is installing door closers to learn how to do it. That's my point. So the process of working with Aloa to figure out how you take these tests is, here's the outline of what's likely, what's the subject matter of the test. You need to bring to it your knowledge and experience to be able to successfully answer these questions. I took the AFL, passed that. They give you a designation after your name, AFL. You're an Aloa Fundamental Locksmith. That's a good thing. I would certainly argue that your client base is going to look at you differently than the next person over when you have a designation after your name. I would not only suggest getting the designation, but I would suggest putting it on everything. I would make sure that all your clients know exactly who it is they're dealing with. You're dealing with somebody who has taken the time to learn how to master the material to the point where I have taken the test, and under the scrutiny of this test, I have been found to be proficient in the subject matter. You want that. You want that at any cost, really. So the AFL is a 5.5-day class. I think they call it 6-day, but I think it really boils down to about 5.5 days. And you do a lot of things. You do bookwork, you do slides on the screen, you do physical work, lots of physical work, shimming cylinders, picking cylinders, cutting keys, getting your hands in the middle of it. It's a very fun and friendly environment. Everybody is there for the same purpose. Everybody is able to draw on the other individual's experiences. I've sat in classes with people who are highly qualified in one particular area, knew nothing about this, which I happen to be qualified in, so we really could get along together because we had something that mutually benefited us both. That sort of scenario. Working with Aloa to figure out, okay, what's the next step? Well, the next step is all of these tests that they have. And they are basically, with the exception of the LOO, the mandatory locksmith exam, they are like 25 question tests. They are all indicated in the PRP exam. There are a couple of dozen classes. For instance, you can take a class on domestic automotive locks. You can take a class on door closers. You can take a class on life safety codes. Pardon me, let me back up. When I say take a class, I mean take a test. You can take a test on life safety codes. Take a test on high security cylinder servicing. Tubular key cylinder, ACE keys, vending machine locks, basic electricity, exit hardware, lever tumbler locks, keyless mechanical locks, motorcycle locks, time locks, safe deposit locks, advanced master keying, lock set installation, safe opening and servicing, small format, interchangeable core servicing, large format, alarms, door hardware in general. So they have all of these exams that you can take. The way that it works with Aloa is that you can take the test. Anyone can take the test. Take the test. If you've got the knowledge, I would expect you will expect to pass. I know that I expect to pass those subject matters that I possess, the proper knowledge in. So you literally become a member of Aloa, which is not mandatory. I think you should, though, because you can then market to your client base. I'm a member of a national organization that has not only checked me out, okay, but has certified that I'm who I say I am, and that hopefully I'm inferring that you can trust me as a fact of the matter that I am a member of a nationally recognized professional organization that has criteria for their membership. Okay. So you can take any of these tests. In order to become a certified registered locksmith, you have to take the LOO, the mandatory locksmithing test. There are, I believe, 10 categories, and they are listed below this video. And I will read them to you, actually. I'm going to pull that up right now. And you will be able to contact Aloa and directly or indirectly, I believe, get a copy of this resource guide, which I do recommend you having a physical copy of. And I'll go over why you should. The 10 categories are codes. Codes meaning there is a code on a key or maybe on the face of a cylinder. What could it mean? What does it mean? Admittedly, I did poorly. Not poorly. I did reasonably well in it, but it was one of my poorest. I had 3 poor subject matters, and that was one of the 3 because I don't encounter codes ever. People don't walk in with a key to a filing cabinet and say, "Help me with this." So I didn't have to develop that. But I took the resource guide, which says Section 1 of the LOO mandatory exam, here are those things that you should be looking at in order to answer this. And that same format applies to all of the 10 categories that I'm about to mention. And they will all list reference material. And all of this here is just part of all of the reading that was done over a period of about 9 months. 8 months. What they don't list on there is the cold, sobering statement, if you haven't spent any of your career directly working on this, expect to struggle with the subject matter. Because there's no amount of reading that you can do to give you the total experience to answer every one of these questions. However, the bottom line is with the test, if you are a working locksmith, yeah, you're going to have bumped into that. If you are a Chris Chase or a John LaRue or a Josh Lloyd, and you've got people walking into your lock shop saying, I need this filing cabinet key. Here's a filing cabinet lock. I need it opened. You're going to develop that experience, and you're going to be able to do well on that test because you have the actual experience. I don't have hardly, not zero, but very little experience. My ability to read as much as humanly possible permitted me to do reasonably well, but not well enough to get over the 70% passing. Right close to it. So I knew when I looked at the 10 categories that I am about to read, I knew that there would be 3 that I would do poorly on. I knew that there were 5 that I should do expertly on, and then I would study for everything and maximize my ability to get over the hump on an average of the 70% required to pass. Then there were pin and disc cylinder servicing. Pin cylinders, pin tumbler cylinders, disc tumbler cylinders. That reading is, I have a lot of experience with pin tumbler. I was pretty confident I would be able to do well in that subject matter because I've spent almost 30 years working on pin tumbler locks. Disc tumbler locks, however, I have very little experience, but you can really read a lot about that stuff. And we're going to go over these books, and I want to mention just who they are, the title, who wrote it, in terms of their value. I knew that I could do well on that because I knew most of it, or I knew a good portion of it. In the disc tumbler locks that I was weak in, I knew that I could learn that. Because it all boils down to, there's a blockage and how to remove or work around that blockage. All locks work on that principle. Chris Chase said it at the very beginning of this class. Locks are a blockage. How to work around the blockage. I wish I had his exact quote. Key blank identification is the third category, and basically being able to look at the bow of a key and kind of know what it is really important, because customer walks in, here, cut me a copy of this. What's the first thing you're going to look at? You're not going to look at the section of the key, the milling grooves, the register groove on the key. You're going to look at the bow. And being able to identify that is a good start to determine what it is. I knew that I would do reasonably well on that because I'm experienced with Schlage and Arrow and Kwikset and Weiser and Falcon and Yale and Corbin and Russwin and Corbin and Russwin. So I knew that I could do good in that, which I did. Key duplication and the equipment used in duplicating keys. I have used lots of key machines. I've used manual duplicators. I've used semi-automatic. I've used code machines. I own a Ritan RY200 or an RY100. I own an HPC 1200. I own a Fromen number 2. I own a Tiger Shark. The point of the matter is, because I use the equipment, yeah, I'm going to do well because I use the equipment. I know how to use it. To someone who's never used a key machine, any of the 4 or 5 options in the test, they all could be right to you. Every single possible answer could be correct because you just don't know anything about it. But if you have experience, you'll do well. I did well in that. Impressioning is the 5th section. I did almost well enough to pass, which I'm angry about because I read a lot about impressioning. I don't have a need to impression cylinders to get a working key. I don't do it. I'm not necessarily gifted with my hands in the terms of locksmithing. But being able to theoretically understand, you've got locksmiths that are just gifted with their hands, and then you have others that are just like the rest of us. I'm like the rest of us, in my opinion. Impressioning, I read volumes on. I understand the concept. I understand how the steps to go about impressioning a key. For some reason, I didn't do as well as I thought I would on that. You will want to, in my opinion, practice. Read, practice. The 6th category is lock opening. I take that to mean, and I don't really recall the questions from that section, but they are questions. Questions 1 through 25 is going to be codes. Questions 26 through 50. So section 1 is where the test started for me, and of course, giving nothing away. Unfortunately, the way that my exam was delivered to me was my weakest subject was what I was hit with first. So it was quite demoralizing at the beginning. I just said by the 10th question, give me a softball. Give me something I can swing at. So lock opening was really the methods, I believe, if I recall correctly, of just how to physically work on locks. How knobs are removed, how cylinders are removed. Like my friend that I called to help me with the Sergeant 8 line. How do I pull the knob off? Functions and finishes, section 7. I excelled in that, literally, because I deal with lock functions and finishes every single day of my life. Then there was section 8, lock servicing. I did well in that as well because I spend a lot of time working on locks, telling other people how to work on locks. Then the 9th section was Master Keying. Master Keying I did exceptionally well on because it happens to be a subject that I'm deeply interested in. I can say that I almost love the subject matter because there's something really neat to sink your teeth into when it comes to the theory of locksmithing, of Master Keying. How these numbers all conspire to be the difference between failure and success, or failure and, yeah, you did a good job, it's clinically acceptable, to you could have did it this way, to here's the best way to do that. Being able to accommodate a client's needs by applying the science of Master Keying, to me, is incredibly interesting. I read a phenomenal book on that, and I'll show it to you in a moment. Then the last section is cabinet locks, furniture locks, and mailbox locks. That was my poorest subject because I don't deal with locks that are on furniture. Mailbox locks, yeah, I'm familiar with bomber mailboxes. I'm familiar with the cheap little lever tumbler style or warded style locks. Cabinet locks, yeah, I deal with that a little bit. They're disc tumbler locks, and I have a basic understanding. But because I don't deal with it is why I did poorly on it. So the moral of the story of the 10 sections is, if you deal with them in your career, you're going to do well. If you take what you already know and you add all the reading, you're going to do really good on the test. If you don't have exposure to some of these subject matters and all you're going to do is rely on the reading, I think you have to be like me, where my original plan was, I know I'm going to excel in these 5+ areas. I know I'm going to do great, and they're going to help me get over these rough ones. The bottom line is this: you cannot afford to be soft on those soft area subject matters completely, because you won't pass. You have to be proficient enough for your really high scores in your strong subject categories to bring you up on those weak ones. And that's what happened for me. It was literally a fist fight. The test, I used all of the available time. I submitted the exam only at the 32nd remaining mark because I literally was devoted and dedicated to doing as well as I could. I had faithfully, religiously studied, on average, an hour a day for 8 months, 7 days a week. Now, that's quite a commitment when you own a business. You have a couple of dozen employees, a wife, a family, demands outside of the workplace. And gosh, I put the work in. And I wasn't going to just go click, 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 and then get out of there. And that's what I did. That's how I became a certified registered locksmith. Who and what prepared me for the test? I've answered that. Chris Chase, Josh Lloyd, John LaRue, they really planted that seed. And it was their mastery of the subject matter and eagerness to share their knowledge. Really planted that seed. Aloa could not be luckier to have those individuals involved in their organization. Is becoming a certified registered locksmith valuable to you? If you feel that when you look at those 10 categories that you can pass, I would absolutely encourage you to study for the test. Do as much as you can to pass the test. Take the test and pass the test. If you don't feel that you can pass the test, I would encourage you to not take it till you're ready, because it is demoralizing. During the test, I realized, my gosh, if I don't pass this test, I don't know what I'm going to do, meaning I don't know how I'm going to restart. What will I reread? What will I, short of customers walking in with code questions, I don't know what the code of a 1970s, this or that automotive application, is talking about, because we're not automotive locksmiths. So I would take the test when you're prepared to take the test. And if you're not, I would take the AFL and I might just park it there. You can then branch off into areas that excite you, like master keying, or maybe the investigation of lever tumbler locks like me, and enrich yourself, and then share that knowledge through your professionalism in the workplace to help your clients obtain their goals. As my uncle said, education's always a good thing, and I would absolutely encourage you to take any and all education that you can get your hands on, whether or not it ends up in a credential after your name. It's nice to be certified. It's nice to pass the test. And yeah, that's really the payoff. But even without the letters after your name, if you can talk on an expert level about how to set up a rotating constant master keying system for a client who's looking for a grandmaster, 4 master keys, and 100 changes under each, yeah, that separates you from your competition. You better believe it. You are not going to lose jobs when other people have no idea what the end user wants, and you possess mastery of it. Okay. The last part of it, I believe it's valuable to you, is the bottom line. The last part of this is to just superficially go over the books. That is Fundamentals of Locksmithing, was the book that I received in the AFL class. A great cursory overview summary that really exposes you to the beginning fundamentals of locksmithing. 2 of my employees have taken the class because I want them to be able to attack problems for our clients and do so in such a way that the company can accomplish its goals, that the individual employee can accomplish their goals, being successful, and the client can obviously, first and foremost, benefit. In no particular order, this Robert Sivaking, if I'm pronouncing his name right, in all of these books are listed in the PRP design guide. I believe all of them are. The Door Lock Encyclopedia was really helpful because Robert goes over lots of locks and how to service them. A lot of locks all work the same way, but I wish I had this book when I was taking apart that Sergeant 8-line lock. This will be very beneficial to read. Advanced Master Lock reading by the same author, very beneficial. A lot of it is, most of this, the first portion of the book is, here are how these locks work, here are the definitions of the terms, here's generally how you'll approach them, here are the tools that you'll use, and then the rest of the book is literally this manufacturer's lock, and it goes on for 24 lock types. It's a living encyclopedia, a field reference. Oh, that's how I do this? Oh, okay, great. Very worthwhile. I bought other books by the same author that I've not read yet. Common Master Keying, I may or may not read because I possess that knowledge I expect. Let me back up. That's important. I just said I may or may not read this. I'm wrong. Read everything about one subject matter, because as I've read elsewhere online, these tests are written by locksmiths. You're getting the question from somebody who has boots on the ground, so to speak. You're going to be getting a clearly accurate question that has only one right answer. The experience of the individual locksmith who wrote that test question is where that question came from. Robert's life experience is going to be different than that locksmith. He will bring some other information. Jerome V. Andrews, Certified Master Locksmith. Now he's, to use parlance of the day, he must be a baller, because to be a CML, you not only have to take the mandatory class, you have to take I don't recall the number of additional PRP tests. You likely have to take practically all of them, and you need to get a 90%. So this fellow right here, when he speaks, that's when you listen, would be my guess. I read his entire Fundamentals of Master Keying book, an irreplaceable document. Irreplaceable. Every person who deals with any function of master keying needs to read this book, in my opinion. Absolutely. The point is, what Jerome says and what Robert says, of course, it's the same science, but you're going to get a different perspective, which is irreplaceable. Interchangeable core service. This is small and full-size cores. I am going to absolutely read this because I'm going to be taking other PRPs. I don't believe it will lead me to the CPL, Certified Professional Locksmith, because I would need to take 8 more PRP tests. I've taken 4. I know of those 8 that I should be able to do pretty good on 4 or 5 of them, but the other 4 or 5 that I would need, or 3 or 4 that I would need, I am never going to be exposed to alarms. I'm never going to be exposed to methods of bypass on safes. So approaching those tests with nothing other than an intellectual understanding, I don't think is what Aloa wants to certify. And I might just read those for my own edification, but not take the test because I don't want the demoralizing leftover feeling of that. Tubular lock service. Not a lot of that I encounter hardly ever, but it is fascinating, and I will probably read that. Now, this comprehensive manual of locksmithing is mentioned, as are countless other books. This is an epic overview of locksmithing in general. This Schenkel and Schenkel Comprehensive Manual of Locksmithing is a really good book. Other books are mentioned. Books by Bill Phillips are mentioned. I own those books. I've read those books. If you are a new locksmith, I do really think you need to read a book like the Comprehensive Manual of Locksmithing, or a book that approaches the subject matter in a total overall summary that will expose you to, oh, you want to be a locksmith? Okay, well, it's not just using a Slim Jim and getting somebody's 1980 Delta 88 Oldsmobile car door open. Yeah, not at all. This is just where you start. I think every locksmith who does not have a certification ought to read something like this. It will benefit themselves and their clients. Low Voltage Study Guide. I have not read this book, but I've taken Aloa's Basic Electricity and passed that, because in my door hardware life, I supply electrified hardware. I need to know how to power that stuff. Life safety codes. I am a certified fire door and egress assembly inspector, so the NFPA 101 is a document that I've spent a lot of time flipping through, and Aloa has their own life safety code test. Understanding life safety code is an incredibly necessary thing in the door industry. I do freak customers out. Hey, yeah, sell me a door. Yeah, I need an exit device. You know what? And prep it for a deadbolt. Stop. What? Well, I got to keep them from stealing the steaks out of the back of my restaurant. Stop. So all of a sudden, you become the code police. And I literally have to tell people, listen, I'm not the code police. But I feel, but it is my obligation to tell you what the code says. Now, I'll do whatever you tell me to do, kind of. But understand that you're in direct violation of the code, and it's not a matter of if, but when the inspector will come, you will found to be deficient on that door. And let's just talk about the reality of the subject matter. What if the door is locked and there's a fire? I mean, you need to find another way to keep material from being stolen from the back of your restaurant. Locksmithing 101 is... I bought this book from Aloa in preparation for the CRL test. It is another summary. It's very well written. It is written by Don O'Shell, who his name will come up everywhere in Aloa. Tony West, I believe his name is pretty common as well. Another overview of the subject matter, Locksmithing 101. I would absolutely read this. I've read it, the entire book, 1 hour a day in a week. I would very much read that as well. Then over here, and they are mentioned, I have my Blitz service manual, and I have my Fromen #2 code machine service manual. You better know your code machines. You better know your key duplicator machines, and you can easily learn that stuff by exposing yourself to the referred to reference documents to prepare for the test. It's listed there. Expose yourself to all of it. There is this book that's mentioned, The Lure of the Lock. I had to stop reading this book, and that's because I knew that it was not going to play a huge role in the test, or at least I believed that it wouldn't. The first portion of the book is important, but getting into these antique lever tumbler style locks with bit or barrel keys, bit keys in this case, I knew became something that I would only read as a result of the love of the subject matter. There is a collection of locksmiths in New York City, the John M. Mossman collection of locks, and I plan on visiting that this summer, in fact, that this book apparently is the handbook, too, to that collection of locks that's in New York City. The John M. Mossman, so you can search that. I do plan on going there, and I will have hopefully read this book in its entirety, because as you read this information about learning about locksmithing, you become aware of these characters, these people, and I just have to get a lock. The name Brahma is going to come up. The name Yale is going to come up. All these other names. This is a Brahma lock. Late-ish 18th century construction or design. Okay. The point of that is you're going to become exposed to all of these things that you may or may not be familiar with at all. But why should you know anything about this Brahma lock, an English lock that you're never going to, at least I don't think, you're ever going to see in the United States? Never. Well, you know why you need to know about it? Because the fundamentals that operate that lock are the same fundamentals that operate your car door on your vehicle, that get you into your house. Okay, it's the same sort of concept that allows you to hit your garage door opener. There's a blockage. The garage door opener is the key to work around or remove the blockage. It's the same thing. It just happens to be an electronic blockage. Now, I only brought one of them. There are two of these books, Volume 1 and Volume 2. They are both this thick. Mark Weber Tobias goes into the absolute most detailed and forensic analysis of every lock type imaginable, the science of the tools used, the science of the materials used to make the tools to work on the locks is detailed. And I read of the 1,300 pages of both volumes, I read probably 1,200 of the pages over a 3 or 4 week period. And I can tell you that if you're going to be a locksmith, you need to read that stuff. Because you are going to walk away with more information, more value to you personally, pound for pound. And I packed this book on a trip with me to San Francisco, pound for pound, than any other book. If you appreciate the minutia of the detail. Because this gentleman delivers that in truckloads. So if you want to talk about the metallurgy of drills and why a particular type of drill will be effective at a certain RPM drilling through a particular type of base material, this is the guy. Why is that important to you? You know what, it actually is. Because someday you're going to use that knowledge. I'm going to realize I want to use this drill bit for this job over this drill bit for the same job. And here's why. Here's why Tobias said to do it. Because this guy's done it. And I thought I would do better in impressioning because of the dozens of pages I read on his impressioning techniques and how to go about doing it. I walked away with that saying, yeah, give me a lock. I'm ready to impression. I mean, I'm ready to be successful. And that's why I'm a little downtrodden. And I do plan on going back and trying to figure out why I was soft on the impressioning subject. So there are a lot more books that are listed, and I brought almost all of the ones that I've read, but not all, maybe 75% of them, just to quickly show. But in the PRP guide, all of those books are there. There are some books that I simply couldn't find. I have no idea. Luckily, it was on a subject matter that I'd covered in another book. And I can only tell you that if you're going to approach the test, I believe that my technique worked. I know it worked for me. I believe that it can work for you as well. Do as well as you can in all areas. Make sure that you are you have complete mastery in the majority of subject matters. Study as hard as you can on those areas that you know you're going to be weak on, and I think you'll do well. Here's the bottom line about Aloa. Aloa is one of the best decisions that I've made to be a member of. I have gone to the national convention. I have taken class. I have bought their books. I have spoken to their people. Incredibly nice, incredibly accommodating, beyond incredibly nice and incredibly accommodating. Okay, so here's an example. This gentleman here, Tom DeMont. Yeah, that's Tom. I've met him. I've chatted with him. The first day of class, of going to the forensics class, it's about 6:30 in the morning, and he's in the parking lot of the hotel in a passenger van, and he looks like a locksmith. I mean, locksmiths have a look. Okay? I'll leave you to fill in the details. He looks like he's a locksmith. He gives me the aura that he's a locksmith, let's say that. And I can see that there were people in his van, and that's where you were all supposed to meet, but I'm looking for the Ramada van, the hotel van to take you over, and I don't see the van, and it's like tick-tock, 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 and I walk over to the passenger van. I'm like, hey, you guys going to the Aloa class? He's like, yeah, get in, come on. It's Tom DeMont. Tom has more certifications after his name than I think I've ever seen. He's an architectural hardware consultant. Something to do with locksmithing. He's a certified fire door inspector. He's a forensic locksmith. He's a master institutional locksmith. He's a master locksmith. I'm not sure what that one means. Nor that one. Nor that one. He's an Aloa registered locksmith. He's an architectural hardware consultant. So for him, it's the reverse. I'm assuming he has lots of experience in the locksmithing industry, but here's a guy who can walk into the door and hardware universe and succeed there as well. So I did the opposite thing, coming from the door hardware industry. But the point of the matter is, I walked up to this stranger's van. He's like, come on, get in. And I later realized the guy driving us there is Tom DeMont, who's got more letters after his name than that I think I've ever seen. Incredibly helpful, excuse me, incredibly accommodating is the point of the matter. Being able to be recognized in the industry as having certification is an incredibly beneficial thing. I absolutely do believe that it is something that is that does perhaps command respect from your peer group. I think that you are and will be and ought to be treated professionally when you have these certifications. What's most important for me is I spend a lot of time making videos of products. What it is, how it is, where it is, how do you use it, how do you install it, how do you troubleshoot it, why do you want it? And I know that a lot of people that are new to the industry watch those videos. I've been in places, in classes in other parts of the country, and people have walked up to me and said, hey, are you Rich Howard? Being able to have the certification permits you to help those people that aren't there yet, because that's what I needed. I needed to call someone and say, can you help me? And without that, I would not have been successful. Where this leads me to, Chris Chase, Josh Lloyd, John LaRue, where this will lead me to is I'm going to read further about Master Keying, advanced levels of Master Keying, tubular lock servicing. I will definitely read a lot more about lever locks. I'm going to go to the lock collection after reading The Lure of the Lock. There's also a science and technology museum obviously in New England. There is a lock museum, but in London as well, there is a science and technology that has all these locks, because England was the birthplace of a lot of lock technology. And that same birthplace explosion occurred in New England in the second half of the 19th century, or during the 19th century. And I'm going to visit all of it. So Chris and Josh and John, where it leads to is I'm going to reinforce what I already know. I'm going to reach out into those other areas that I don't yet possess a good grasp on. And most importantly, I'm going to try to enrich the experience of those that are in the initial learning stages. I am going to apply to be an instructor at DHI so that I can help with their master keying or their keying. They have a one-day keying class they offer. I've taken that class. I believe I can do a good job. And I believe that I can bring the perspective of the certified registered locksmith to the door hardware industry when it comes to that subject matter. Your help and the help of others have been irreplaceable in this pursuit. I would say dive in and don't hesitate. If you have any questions on any of the things I've blabbed on about, please feel free to reach out. My name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. Thank you very much.